Welcome to the Gonna Geek Network's Purposely Podcasting with the Gonna Geek Network. And yes, I did just read that off the internet right there. But yeah, welcome. I am SP. I actually go by Stargate Pioneer on Twitter and things, but I'm the Vice President of Network Development for Gonna Geek. I actually host or co-host 5 different podcasts on the network. And yeah, it's a full-time job just with my hobby. But one of the shows I do with Michelle.
Yes, I'm Michelle Ealey. I am a co-host on the Starlight Tribune. It's a podcast dedicated to the show Arrow and the other Flareverse shows. And I'm also the social media director for the podcast. I've actually been doing stuff, and it's weird getting more Twitter followers. It's like, I don't know how I'm doing that, but I'm doing it. So, okay. And yeah, that's me.
I'm Cody Gough. I originally joined the network when I co-hosted Unqualified Gamers with this jerk that you'll talk to, and we'll talk in a second. And then we stopped doing that and rebranded to a podcast called Game Life Balance, which is about balancing video games and adult life, and is ironically on hiatus because we don't have time to do the podcast. So we actually started a break about a month ago. But I also, as part of my day job, I host and produce the Curiosity podcast for curiosity.com, which you should check out if you haven't.
I'm Jonathan Martin. I'm the other co-host of Game Life Balance US. Again, we started off as Unqualified Gamers. And that was before we kind of grew up a little bit and had real jobs and other responsibilities. So that's why we rebranded. I have the fortunate experience of having him do basically all of the work on the podcast. So that actually works out really well for me. So if you can figure out a way to make that work for you, I would highly recommend it.
But he got me into podcasting, and I mentioned at the end of the last panel, I kind of got into podcasting because I wanted to own my own. I was doing some acting and some improv and stuff, but you have to audition and get cast in roles to do student films or whatever, and a lot of that's arbitrary. And I wanted to be able to be like, here's a thing I'm doing. I don't need to book a theater. I don't need to audition and blah, blah, blah. And
like, for those of you that have a podcast already, for those of you that are like thinking of starting one up, one of the great things is if you are not in a position maybe with what you're doing with your career to explore some sort of creative thing that you want to do, podcasting is a great hobby on the side to create something, to put something out into the world that you think could make the world better, right? So it's a great creative outlet if you don't have one in your everyday life.
Yeah, so we are here to answer your questions first and foremost. We want to open the floor at any time. Just go, hey, guys, got a question. We'll stop, answer it, because that's what we're here for, to educate you. In the meantime, we're going to start off by answering the question, what are you trying to do with your podcast? Are you trying to educate? Are you trying to inform? Are you trying to entertain? Are you trying to get a story out? What are you trying to do with your podcast? So, Jonathan.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do with your podcast?
Originally, when we first started, and keep in mind that we started was about 2011?
Yeah.
So it was when podcasting was kind of in its infancy, and there was a lot of room for people in that area. There were not a ton of people doing it at that point. So we just started your average video game podcast because we played a lot of video games at the time. Our plan was basically just, we're going to play video games. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about kind of what we're playing at the time. We had a couple of little segments that we had developed over the course of us doing that podcast over a couple of years. And that was it was an excuse. The other thing we had was it was an excuse for us to basically get together long distance because we've known each other for so long. We went to college, and then we, like many people, got blown to the winds across the country along with a lot of our other friends. And it was just an excuse for us to get together every week, talk, kind of catch up. And it was really nice. And that's actually still one of the great advantages of doing it. But what we did was we said, we need some sort of topic to rally around, because I would say the most important thing about what you are doing in your podcast is that you are interested in it. You are able to comfortably talk about it and not have a lot of dead air when you're there podcasting. It needs to be a topic you're passionate about. So it was just an easy thing for us to come together on and talk about. And we just kind of wanted to inform and entertain about video games that we were playing at the time.
Yeah, this was back when you listened to Giant Bombcast and the One Up podcast?
That was when One Up was still around.
Yeah, and there weren't that many big video game podcasts. This is before Nerdist was as massive as it is, turning from the Nerdist podcast into like 300 podcasts. So yeah, I think, and one of the important things about getting into podcasting is what makes you different, right? Not just having a niche, but how are you different? And our thing was we've known each other for 20, 25 years at the time. So it's like our rapport is going to be fun. We're going to have like fun back and forth. It'll be probably kind of funny, and it often was. Wait, what was the original topic we were talking about? What do
you want to do?
Oh, what do you want to do with the podcast? So when we started, and this is something I highly recommend, let's say you're already podcasting, let's say maybe you're not getting all the listens you need. You have opportunities to develop skills that you could use in your professional life that you wouldn't otherwise have an excuse to do. So when we launched, I was thinking about marketing, and I had just been hired as a social media manager because it was a brand new field. The job title social media manager didn't exist 7 years ago, right? Like literally, I had 2 interviews and they both said, this is the first time we've ever had this position, so we don't know exactly what you'll do. So I had just been hired as a social media manager, and I'm thinking about how to market our podcast. And I'm thinking, all right, I know 1,000 improvisers who have started a Facebook fan page for their improv group, and they start the page, they invite a bunch of people, they post once, and then it's gone. All right. Twitter is like really hard to market on. It's hard to get a following unless you're really passionate about it. But around 2010, 2011, that's when Google Plus was starting to be a thing. Anybody use Google Plus in here? A couple people. Cool. Awesome. Wonderful. So I did too. I was like, I want to make a Google Plus page. And John's like, what is wrong with you? What are you talking about? Yeah. I made one. I started to get into circle shares and all these weird tactics. We ended up with like 16,000 followers or something on Google Plus. Right. Probably 80% were bots or artists from overseas trying to sell stuff. But I became really familiar with Google Plus. And when we would get a question from a client at my marketing agency for my day job, I could say, oh, I know Google Plus. Like, I'm familiar with this. I also signed up for Tumblr for the same reason, to market our podcast. I still don't know how to use Tumblr. Tumblr is, I think, way less intuitive than any other platform. But what I'm saying is I took these skills, you know.
Wait a minute, Cody. So what you're saying is you're bad at your job.
Definitely that part of the job. But what I'd be able to do is this stuff. And if you have a design background, you're interested in designing more stuff, or you want to get a graphic designer job or something, whether you're in college or in the middle of your career, if there's any aspect of the podcast, you want to learn some HTML to build the website, you want to learn how to do web design, you want to learn the graphic stuff, the social media stuff, the marketing, there's so much you can learn when you're trying to do a thing with your podcast. And you're automatically going to be more invested because it's your thing and you own it. So I guess the purpose of that gets a little bit away from the question. But for me, it was not just I'm going to produce cool content, but also I'm going to hone all these skills. And the breadth of things I learned to do. I mean, I learned how to build an RSS feed. I learned how to feed it into WordPress. I learned all about WordPress layouts and premium themes and the art. And it's exploded to where I've got all these crazy random skills now, and you kind of become your own little Swiss Army knife. So, you know, whether you're getting a zillion downloads or not, you can also kind of cultivate extra skills. So that was really long-winded.
I'm shocked.
I don't have such a long-winded thing. I just wanted to learn how to embrace my weird. If you listen to the Starling Tribune, I'm the weird one. No, you're the old one. No, like for example, on this season, last season there was a guy Curtis. He became Mr. Terrific, and he has this wonderful afro, right? And he had wonderful natural hair. But then when he was in his, Mr. Terrific, all of a sudden it was in braids. And I don't know a lot about natural hair, but I know it takes a little bit more than 5 minutes. So here I am on the podcast. It's like, you know what? I think they have an automatic braiding machine. That's what they have in the air. Okay, that's me. You know, learning to embrace my weird, learning to express my weird. being brave enough to be a woman on the internet, because that takes a lot. Also, because in my day job, I have to be measured and careful with every single thing I say because I interact with children. And it's, I have to be like Clark Kent in my day job. And then when I'm like podcasting, it's like, oh, I can just be me. And that's really what I do.
I just started podcasting to geek out with other people about stuff that I enjoyed, right? So you don't hear talk about the latest episode of The Expanse anywhere. Well, now you do on podcasts, but 10, 15 years ago around the water cooler, you didn't do it. You didn't find that. And I didn't want to go to the local watering hole and play beer trivia with different people. As you get older, that gets old. So yeah, I started podcasting just to hang out and have fun.
Did you call it a watering hole?
I did.
See, he's the old one.
I am the old person, yes. Yeah, I may or may not be over 50, and let's not talk about the 60 mark. So what we get to do is we get to talk to each other. We get to be excited. We get to entertain different people. It's like skits, right? So we get to have open mic night every week on our shows, which is great. And then because I am a rocket scientist, I do geek out about the tech, as you might or might not see right in front of you. So yeah, I do know a thing or two about the audio quality and what you can do on a cheap, inexpensive budget and what you can do with a more expensive budget. I'm pretty good around the swath of it, which is why I started Better Podcasting with Steven, the network owners. We wanted to help other people create great content. And sometimes the technological hurdle is there, as well as how do you actually format an episode? Do you write show notes? Do you actually script things out? I run the gambit on my shows, so I can pretty much answer a lot of questions there.
Yeah, we'll definitely answer a lot of questions, but I will shamelessly plug, since you might be humble about it, but Better Podcasting is actually an extremely good resource. Because if you go to Better Podcasting, each episode it'll be like one episode. Which mic do I choose? Okay, mic 101. They'll run mic tests on the show, and so you can hear the difference in the sound. They'll say there'll be a whole episode on how do I search engine optimize? How do each one has like its own niche thing. So you can totally skip it if you think, oh, I know how to market, or oh, I know how to get my co-host to show up on time, or whatever it might be. But they're all really specialized. So, and anything we don't cover, like that's an excellent resource.
So that second one, was that a sore subject between you two?
No, you did an episode on that. I thought
we did co-host.
Yeah, I'm co-host.
Just to echo that, what Cody was saying. So SP, when the network was kind of in its infancy, we were like the fourth or fifth show on it, something like that.
Fourth, I believe.
Yeah. Roughly 80%. So we share a Facebook group, and we've shared other ways to communicate as a network. Roughly 80% of SP's posts were discounted prices on various equipment that you could buy on the internet when it came up. And I jumped on one of those, got like a decent mic that I still use for, literally that mic. For, I think at that time when I bought it, it was $60 discounted down. And it was great. And obviously I wouldn't have known about it without him. So he really does, like, I can't echo that enough, that he knows his stuff when it comes to equipment. So if I understand that is one of the biggest barriers to entry, because it can be intimidating to just be like, I have all of this stuff that I feel like I need to buy to even start this, and you just don't.
Who came because they're primarily have questions about equipment and the hardware.
What kind of equipment question do you have? We'll get that out of the way then.
Actually, I was curious about the headset you were making.
Yeah, okay. So this is a broadcast headset with a dynamic cardioid microphone capsule on it. It's called the Audio-Technica BPHS1, and it goes for about $200, and it's not a USB chat headset, though I have not met one with a decent microphone on it. If somebody would make one of these USB, they would make a killing, because I know that's what everybody wants, right? So you get an XLR cord, which is what a normal studio microphone is, as well as a headphone jack with it. And then you plug it in to a USB interface or a mixer or something like that. And if you're doing a gaming podcast with 6, 12 people around a table, if you want to get the optimum sound while trying to maximize the movement capability and not get pounding, I won't do it because they were actually recording that, but pounding on the surface of the desk, you either have to go with a microphone stand that's off to the side or one of these. And these are the same things that you would see a basketball commentator use or a football announcer use. They get more expensive than this, but this is the least expensive option that I've seen. And unfortunately, it does run $200 or $180 on sale, but it is the maximum, the optimum use of a microphone and headset, because everybody can then monitor themselves as well. So they understand how they're actually hearing. And that's something that I would advocate as well, no matter what kind of podcast you're doing. Like, we're recording this right now, and it's kind of grating on me a little bit that we're not sitting here with headphones, but hey, it's a live audience, who cares? But if you're recording for release on the internet later, you probably want to actually monitor your sound and have everybody monitor their sound so they know that they need to get closer or back away from the microphone or adjust levels or something like that. Now, if you're not doing a play podcast, what I would recommend is a dynamic cardioid USB or XLR microphone. This is new on the scene relatively in the last couple of years. A lot of people haven't heard about this. It's called the Knox podcasting microphone, and Knox is spelled like Fort Knox. It's $40. It has both USB and XLR capability. It's very similar to both of these Audio-Technica microphones, and you can actually get a signal out of both the XLR and the USB simultaneously. If you want one of these, this is the Audio-Technica AT2005. It's actually my favorite microphone, and this is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. They're slightly more expensive than the Knox. I've had these apart. They look and sound exactly the same. So if you want to save yourself some money, go with the Knox podcast microphone.
What was the number on that?
What?
The number on the
ATR 2100. Or this is the AT 2005, excuse me, that I was holding up. I was confused as to which one I was holding up.
In the 2005, you said it was the one that's quality-wise pretty much identical to the Knox?
They're all kind of, on the inside, they're all the same. Now, what's slightly different in the AT 2005 is the interior foam windscreen is a little bit more robust. So it will contain the plosives, like every time I say p, p or b, it will contain that a little bit better, and it won't be. Yeah, I would put a pot filter on everything. Yep. So those are the starter microphones. If you are interested in going to a more broadcast microphone, I have some options there, but those start at $230 on up to about $350 with the same microphone that Michael Jackson used to record Thriller, by the way, the Shure SM7B. It's $350.
Now, that being said, what did you say you were currently using on your, because you're putting something in the middle of the table, right?
It's a Tascam DR40.
Okay.
So very similar to this Zoom, well, actually that Zoom H5 over there, it's just the Tascam variety of it.
Yeah, basically like about the Tascam was it could be either XY or AB positioning.
Right.
So,
But you're still picking up a lot of ambient sound with it and stuff, yeah. Yeah.
Are you doing a tabletop gaming podcast? Okay, yeah. I know those are getting a lot more popular. I mentioned in the previous session, there are a couple really good ones I've heard, and there's a handful of really bad ones. And I think some of it comes from the mic quality. I think ideally, if you're able to get, a small mixer and 5 or 6 mics, but that jacks up the price pretty significantly. So I can't. What are you doing to clean up the audio?
right now I'm using Adobe Audition.
Audition's the best.
Yeah, it's just
Well, for me.
Second to white noise in the beginning for sampling and use that for removal down the road.
Good call.
So, it works, but definitely just saving up the money in the meantime to actually get a decent set of mics. So each person can have their own tracks. You edit each person individually.
You're going to end up with cross bleed no matter what you do. Like these 4 microphones right now, I am being picked up on all 4 of them. So you're going to get that, but you can isolate sounds a little bit better. Yeah.
So I have related to the actual play. You talked about having the headsets, right? One of the big features that people seem to like, people we've discussed, because we're in the process of deciding whether we want to get into the actual play world or not, is that people like to hear the sound of the dice rolling on the table.
Yes.
Makes them feel more immersive, like that they're there. Would you, in that case, if you have all the headsets on, I'm not sure you would pick it up in the same way if you have the mic actually on the table?
You can put another microphone on the table. Yeah. Like this Zoom H6 has an XY capsule. I just don't have it on it right now. The H5 comes with an XY capsule. The Tascam DR40 has an XY capsule. The problem you're going to run into is even with the Zoom H6, it only has 6 total inputs. So if you have more than 6 people playing, you're going to have to, there's a brand new thing out on the streets just in a couple weeks. It's called the Zoom L12. And it's a mixer and a digital portable recorder. I'm very interested to get my hands on that to see how it works. But right now in the active play world, that is what I would advise people to do, because you can not only record, but you can actually have multiple inputs beyond the 6 inputs, a total of 12 inputs. So that's what I would do from a technology perspective.
Does it record each mic as an individual track?
You can, yeah, absolutely. Of course, you're going to have a big SD card in there, but that's becoming cheaper and cheaper.
A big SD card.
Big SD. There you go. SP uses a big SD, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, what is there a drawback to using like lavaliers or wireless lavaliers, and which sure makes a virtual reasonably well reversed?
Lavaliers are really popular for YouTubers or videographers, though, and a lot of people bring them because they're small. You can go to conventions like this and grab an interview with somebody and just have a couple, one on you and one on the other person. They are by large and far almost 100% condenser microphones. So the issue that you're going to have with them is it's going to pick up everything around you, ambient noise, which is not all the time bad. Like if I'm at a convention, if I'm on the Gen Con floor right now, and if I want to talk to a vendor or an artist or something like that, I kind of want that ambiance in there. But I'll tell you, even with these mics, you're going to pick up enough of that it's not going to be that big of a deal. So that is the only qualification I have against lavaliers, is they are condenser microphones. So you're going to pick up everything, like the air conditioner that keeps on going on and off here. These microphones will pick up a little bit of it, but their pattern is a super cardioid pattern on these interview microphones, so they pick up less. These are not super cardioid, but they are dynamic cardioid, so it is largely in front. Like if there was a sound that was directly coming from behind, you're not going to pick it up, not as well, unless it's really loud. So sorry for getting tech geeky, guys, but I figured that there would be some questions, so I brought some show and tell items.
So just to bring it back around to the very beginning. So when I first started, I am like the layman when it comes to podcasting and podcasting equipment. Like I am the guy that basically somebody says, buy this, and then if it seems reasonable, I would like buy that and then use that as equipment. But before I bought the AT2100, I was literally using a $20 live chat. Microsoft Live Chat headset with a microphone. That is what we recorded on for the first couple of years.
It certainly is.
It is. But, well, you say that, but the sound was not awful. It was serviceable. Let me put it this way. If you are unable to invest in an $80 microphone or a $200 headset, there are options that are serviceable to at least start the process of podcasting if that is what your barrier is.
Ideally with some, I did some cleanup on his track. So there were, using Adobe Audition, you can use a couple of filters, kind of boost the bass a little bit and adjust the patterns a little bit. So so there was some cleanup there to make it a little more palatable.
Point is though, if you go back and listen to those episodes that we have archived, they are reasonable enough.
It sounds surprisingly decent. Like I go back and I expect, he's on a chat headset, this is going to sound awful. But I listen and I'm like, this actually is.
And it's a $20 chat headset. So you don't have to invest in some sort of heavy equipment to at least start the process.
And that said, it sounds a lot better now that he has the mic. But again, it wasn't, and there are bad mics that you can buy and they will sound bad.
If you want to start and you don't want to buy anything just to try it out, I would recommend, if you either have or can get a hold of the Apple earbuds, the ones with the microphone on it, that is pretty good, pretty decent sound. And you can start off with that and just see if you want to progress and actually buy a $20 headset, or I would go $40 for the Knox personally. It's going to save you so much time and hassle later on as well. So yeah, it's all great. And you started out with a chat headset too.
Yeah, that's what I did. I started off with the chat headset, and then I got a Blue Snowball because those were the rage at one point. But then that sound was actually a little bit worse than the chat headset because it picked up picked up everything. Like I was recording one time, and then there was like the trash people. It was all the way down the street, and so I'm playing back, and it's like I actually heard, the trash being picked up down the street, and it's like I gotta do something different. And then it was literally one of SP's posts where it was like it was long enough ago where I got the AT 2005 for a really good price. Like it was literally when his post was like, I don't think I've seen it this low for like ever. And it was like, really? And it's SP. And he is like our godfather of tech, really. We kissed the ring. It's in our contracts. And so, and went in those things, and I got it, and I sound a heck of a lot better. But, you've got your phone, you've got everything. Your first 3 to 5 episodes are going to be awful, but you're finding your footing and everything. So don't be afraid, because just do it, and you'll get better mic skills. Like my mic skills have just like really improved over the past year. And so, and everything like that. But once you start doing it and getting it, because really you need to find out if you like the bug or not. If you're like, gee, I think I want to play golf. Let me go get this $1,000 golf set. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm now like yelling and I've bent one of these and oh my gosh, let me try to sell this golf set minus this one club. Don't, test the waters before how long did it take you? This is like what, 5 years worth of collecting or something?
Well, it wasn't just it was education. I went out and sought the knowledge to put this all together. It wasn't just happenstance that it all came together. Yeah, but it's not. I want to learn how to fly. I'm not going to go out and buy a $10 million Citation 10 tomorrow. No, I wish I could, but it's not going to happen. And yes, I could already fly it, but podcasting there's a tech hurdle, but once you get over the tech hurdle, there's a bunch of different stuff. So they mentioned, Michelle just mentioned, record a few episodes first. Even with better podcasting with Steven and I, who had hundreds and hundreds of episodes underneath our belt, it took us like 3 or 4 episodes for us to hit our stride before we were actually comfortable with the podcast. And if I had to do it over again, I would have done those episodes offline, and then I would have re-recorded episode 1 and gone on with that once we knew where it was going. There are pluses and minuses to that. The minus is you don't get any feedback whatsoever. If you don't put it out there, you're not going to know if people are interested in your topic, if they're interested in what you do and interested in your microphone skills. And Cody, you just started the Curiosity podcast. And would you say you hit it running out of the gate with episode 1?
God, no. Now, the podcast I just launched, my job is a little different because that went through all the quality control and revisions, because I've got a boss and then his boss and then the CEO. It was like a big thing. So it's like tweak this, tweak that, make the length different, insert this here, change the theme song. Oh my God, the theme song. That was a week of work. That was just like a full day work was just sucked by just searching royalty-free music. And I kind of, so I can tell you this. One of my bosses is obsessed with the Tim Ferriss podcast. Has anybody listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast? Okay, a couple people. All right. So he's got a TV show now that he helped co-produce with Vince Vaughn. He interviews really interesting people. If you're really interested in it, I would actually highly recommend his episode on cryptocurrency. Fascinating. It's like 2 hours, but you'll learn a lot. But the Tim Ferriss show always has these interesting people, but it's got the most generic theme song. It's a terrible intro and it's techno. It's just like for like 30 seconds. It's got some drops in there, a couple like audio clips that are poorly mixed. You can barely hear them. Like it's a garbage intro. So I'm like, all right, I like EDM. Our Game Life Balance has a really, really cool, the kind of dubsteppy kind of EDM intro. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'll find all these samples. So I painstakingly, meticulously go through like 10 different websites and find a couple tracks where I'm thinking, okay, cool. I can talk over the intro and then it drops here and it'll be like hitting the post. It'll be awesome. It'll be wonderful. And then I send a Google form to all my coworkers and I say, all right, which theme songs do you like the most? And there was one that was like a piano and saxophone at the beginning that was kind of jazzy and loungy that almost everyone voted for. And in the comments that I included in a section of the Google forum, one person said, "I don't want to feel like I'm rolling on Molly at a concert." One other person said, "I don't want to feel like I'm flashing glow sticks." So everyone hated it. So I had to go all the way back to the drawing board, find all these different theme songs. That was just a total nightmare. But I forgot your question. I just had to tell that stupid theme song story.
Yeah, that's an interesting part. Royalty-free music. So even with Better Podcasting, it took us months before we actually found the theme. Better Podcasting took over 10 months in development. And this is from two people who probably could have used a little bit more time, like in their hobby, to get it together. But it took 10 months for us, and we knew what we were doing in order to put that together. So preparation is key. Jonathan, when you did show notes for Game Life Balance, did you put them together or did Cody put them together?
We both put them together, actually. So we have the actual show notes that get posted with the podcasts, Cody writes up based on the episode. But when we prepare for an episode, we have a shared Google Doc that we are kind of updating. We constantly update when we prepare for a show. And so that tells us like what kind of segments we're going to do on that show, because we have a variety of segments that we pull in a couple of for each show. And then it also allows us just to kind of put the details of what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, John pointed out at one point in our podcast, we needed some kind of structure because it was basically...
When we first started, we had nothing. Like we just said, we're going to sit down and we're going to like talk. And I mean, you can imagine what that was like. Those episodes, they kind of meandered everywhere. There was
hilariously.
Yeah, I mean, like we have some good banter in there, but like if you're coming for something specific, that was not the right show.
Yeah, if we said we're going to review Binding of Isaac today, here's our Binding of Isaac episode. Well, when does that happen? First, do we check in on our weekends first, and then we talk about Binding of Isaac, or do we talk about what we've been playing, or do we say, oh, here's what our listeners on Google Plus said they played this last weekend, and then we do it? Do we try to get people in the hook right away and then give it away at the first half? So that was a whole process. For Game Life Balance, we agreed on, all right, what are maybe 5 or 6 different general topic areas that we will discuss per episode, and then each episode will be a little bit different. Maybe we'll do a life stuff segment and a full gamer review. Maybe we'll do a oddities segment or a current news segment, or a joy of parenting segment about some nightmare plague that his child gave him, because kids get sick a lot apparently. I've heard, I don't know.
You do.
So yeah, that gave it some structure. And then, yeah, as the week kind of goes on, we'd fill in and be like, well, I want to talk about this, fits into that segment, boom. And then right before the show, we would just say, all right, here's the 3 or 4 things we want to talk about. We'd order it. So show prep, I will say, changed significantly the course of our podcast, because for years we didn't. It was, I would show, and the thing is, so he's in Minneapolis and I'm in Chicago. So we do it all online. He sends me the file, I mix them. And not being together, like we don't play the same games. So when we review games, we don't review games. One of us reviews the game. He'll say, this week I played this and this week I played this. We've only done over 6 years, probably 5 or 6 episodes we review the same game at the same time. Right. He did Rogue Legacy like 2 years before I did Rogue Legacy. He did Hearthstone, I don't even know, at least a couple of years before I did Hearthstone. So yeah, adding some structure in, you start to, well, you go ahead.
So Michelle, we do an hour-long podcast on the Starling Tribune weekly. How much that you do some of the best show notes that I've seen in the industry, quite frankly. How long do you spend putting those together?
Well, yeah, because show notes, it literally can just be, a short outline. But for the Starling Tribune, we have a standard where it is like 3 to 4 pages. If I'm working off of the previous, show note structure that they have, because I'm the newest co-host, and I've taken it and I've sort of refined it a little bit, because in there we have the intro, we have a space where we pick our favorite quote and we say it. Then there's the intro, then it's the breakdown of the episode, then we talk about the characters, then we do what we're doing the next episode, and then we do news. And I am responsible for gathering the news. So how long does it take for me to do show notes? First, I have to just watch the episode. I also live tweet when it's, when it's on. Like right now it's the summer, not really live tweeting. So I have to just like plain old watch the episode. I then have to rewatch the episode. So that way I have more detailed notes. And I also basically outline the episode for the guys to help all of us know some of like the major things that happened. So for example, if there was a great fight, I'm like putting fight at the warehouse, flip kick, special arrow, whatever. And then Oliver did this, or do you think, put like something, Curtis said really bad joke. And then I'm doing that type of stuff. So that is so it's an hour to watch the show. It is an hour to an hour and a half for me to do that part of, depending on how good the episode was or not. I then have to look up the IMDb and the ratings information as much as I can, because I will be also do something with the director. That can be anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how. It's very difficult because if we're doing summer shows and we're doing live +7, it's very difficult to find the Arrow because the person who does the Arrow wiki page decided that Arrow was just not enough to do the live +7. So I actually have to hunt for that. So that's added a little bit more time. And then I curate the news articles, which means I actually have to read every single one. I have to determine if this, like one of the websites, they like to take a larger article and they like to, like from somebody else, and then they rip that and they make 5 little ones. So I put my job to find the source, and I do the original article in the show notes. So because to me, that's a lot better than doing like these 5 little, like, well, they just stole it from here. No, I go to the source. And then I determine, like, does this interview really say, oh, it's this character who says they want to play Catwoman someday? Like, no, we don't need that. We don't need that. The executive producer has said this and this. I got to make sure that, it's relevant and timely. So that part could take anywhere from, depending if it's like, oh my God, San Diego Comic-Con. That was like almost 3 hours. When it's going to get really heavy for me when the show starts in October, because there's going to be a lot of stuff coming up in September. So that's literally anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, because I read it, I call it, I then put it in there. And then right before we have, like, I put in the show notes. I changed this. I actually put in there, it's like, you put your name by the story you want to cover. So this way, then we don't have who wants to cover, who has a comment, because that was too much. So I put that in the show notes. And then, because I put my name, like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about Supergirl. So I put my name in there first. And then like Chris will put in like his, and then I've gotten to the habit, because we like to do, back and forth. I'm reordering it so SP can just move along. I made the executive decision. We used to do like this checklist thing. I'm like, this is getting too much. This is too boring. So I took it out. And to me, it's made the show a lot better, because it gives us more time to talk about weird stuff. It gives us more time to talk about the news story, because sometimes we disagree and it's like, no, Felicity is alive. No, she's not, all that type of stuff. And then we wrap up, and that's it. So it can take me anywhere from 4 to 6 hours to do show notes, because that is the quality that we have. Now, there's another show that I guess is, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Their show notes are a little bit looser. You don't have to have the tight scripted. It's what you and your co-host are more familiar with. It can just be a nice bullet point on a Google Doc. But even if you do a solo podcast, you need bullet notes. You need something to help. So you're just like, what are they going to talk about next? What? So this way you can get through the recording and you have your high energy and stuff. Yes, ma'am?
So do you find that more pre-show notes is less time in post, fixing mistakes?
Yeah. So on a couple of my shows, what we do is we actually write edit points as we go along at the end of the document, and that helps. For a couple of the shows that I produce, I actually have to go back and listen minute by minute, and it takes me an hour for about every 10 minutes if I'm lucky on a good day of podcast. So an hour of podcast is going to take me at least 6 hours in the editing bay afterwards for those that I listen. Yeah, for those shows. But for the shows that we do pre-production and do the edit notes during, like Gonna Geek or Better Podcasting, it makes the editor's job a lot easier. Now, there's two different versions of show notes. I just realized this as we were talking. There's like a show script, and then there's show notes, which you post later. The script, the better that is, the easier it is for me to post the actual show notes. So I'm all for actually creating good show notes. It helps you at every stage of the production, from pre to knowing what you're going to talk about. So you're not like, or, why don't you read this now? Or why don't you do this now?
It also helps with, it's also nice for you. I mean, there's episodes of Unqualified Gamers where I know we did really funny stuff. I didn't do show notes until at least a couple years into our podcast. So I have no way of searching for that. All I'll have on episode 1 is we review Binding of Isaac. Like, that's it. I don't know if he has some crazy anecdote about moving a treadmill out of his basement, which happened in an episode and was hilarious and is a great story. But unless that's in the show notes, it's not there.
For the time he sold all of his video games.
That was, that was.
It helps with the energy of the recording because, all that pre-production, it's a lot. But when we hit record, we have a great energy level, and it allows us to, we have that, but then it allows us to just do weird little things and have little side conversations. Because yes, we're tangent, but because we have those show notes, one of us can go, hey, that's interesting, but what about Sarah on the Wave Rider, and everything like that. So it really helps with the energy. And then when you're going back and editing, you actually sort of like what you hear because you had that nice energy and you're like, okay, we got something here.
One last thing on that to answer your question is because our show notes are so good and we're used to our format, I just remembered this. It's been years since I've actually had to go back and rearrange things in the podcast to fit better. I don't have to do that. And that used to take a few hours too, because you're like, well, should this statement actually be before we talk about this? I don't do that. So
I was going to say one more thing. I'll take your question 1 second, but one more thing to add about listening back to your podcast. When I started at WGN Radio as a part-time producer 8-9 years ago, I talked to one of the news guys, Christopher Michael. He'd been there for 50 years or something, about how do I get into hosting and how do I become more of an on mic person. And he said, here's what you need to do. Like, if you're not sure how a show would go or whatever, sit down, record yourself talking for 30 minutes. Now, here's the hard part: listen to it, and that is the hardest part. And you have to listen to your own recording. You just have to. If you want to get better, that's the number one thing you can do. And if you find that you have a particular tick, if you say like before things, if you say like, I'm going to give you a bunch of examples and it's going to be like this, and it just said like 15 times and it's really crazy. Then if you find you're doing something like that, or you have a tick or whatever, edit all of them out. Go into the waveform, manually edit out all of those. I guarantee you that will discourage you from doing that same thing again, because you will think, dear God, this is terrible. Now, if a guest does it, there's not as much that you can do. I've had guests on the Curiosity podcast. There was a guy that said, before almost everything, he would.
Sometimes you can't take those out. It's just the way the waveform is.
Yeah, is actually one of the hardest ones to edit out, because almost every syllable that you'll hear it if you really listen closely, but every syllable kind of rolls into an L. So the end of any word is going to clip onto it. So if you edit it out, it's going to sound really clipped. So is actually one of the worst ones you can possibly have. Sorry, there was a question with the tan shirt first. And
I was curious. I don't know much about podcast networks. Yep. So I see that you guys are part of a podcast network. I was curious what the pros and cons of
So Gonna Geek is a network specifically for cross promotion and like shows. And what we do is we record a pre-roll, and that goes in front of all the podcasts, and then we pick and choose. I actually rotate on an alphabetical basis on my shows. So we've got 24 shows on the network right now, and each host has their own pre-roll. Each show has a combined pre-roll. So I just run through that. So that's cross promotion. And then we talk about the shows at a promotion piece or a commercial piece during the show. For other networks that actually monetize, they can actually buy ad space for you, although you're paying back to the network a portion of that. So with Gonna Geek, your show is your show. We don't actually take any money. And if you're interested in joining Gonna Geek or checking out what it is to be part of Gonna Geek, you can go to gonnageek.com/join. And there's actually a forum that rolls you through the pros and the cons. We're running out of time. Otherwise, I'd get a little bit more in depth.
We can talk to you more after.
Yeah.
You talk about verbal tics and that kind of stuff. So our podcast, we usually have either 3 or 4 people on it, and we're all in the same room, so it's pretty easy in terms of some things. But I do all the editing, and the verbal tic thing makes me crazy sometimes. And I have heard all of mine, so I have learned to limit, my own, because I have to hear it over and over again. But do you have any strategy for the people around the table that don't understand how bad it is?
Yes, I do. And I've done this with several people. I've actually asked them if they wanted to do it first, so I don't just surprise them with it. But I run all of the edits that I've done for them in one file. I created a YouTube teaching explanation, and I've uploaded it privately or unlisted. And then I said, if you want to hear more about what you're doing and want to make yourself better, here are some suggestions. And I send them off to you. You could do different variations of that. You don't have to do exactly how I did it. But yeah, if you run through your co-host or your guest, and if they want to make their microphone presence better, that is the number one thing that's helped. It is actually changed the way that several people on the Gonna Geek network have actually spoken on microphone because of what I've been able to show them. If they're not editing, they don't understand.
One quick addition to that, I've noticed that John was remarkably good at not having any of that. He didn't say ums even if he would do Obama thing where you just leave a space in between words. And it was really great. What I've noticed is everyone in the world, at least me especially, can be kind of a chameleon with talking. If I'm with my fiance a whole lot, she says like a bunch, and I will start to say like a bunch. If John is at the start of a podcast talking more, I will just subconsciously start to emulate that, and I'll say less. There's episodes where I talk a lot more at the start, and if I say a few times, those are the ones where John will say a few times. So get the clearest speaker, and just the first minute or two, get somebody to do that with no tics or whatever, and it's remarkable. It's the weirdest thing, but people will actually kind of mirror and emulate that just unconsciously.
We have time for one more question. Right? If not, okay.
So typically podcasts come out once a week, usually.
It really depends. There's some that are bi-weekly. Some even go up monthly.
So my question is, on social media, what do you guys do the rest of the week besides just the tweet that says, our new show's up?
This is such a good question.
Yeah, and unfortunately we don't have time to go into depth on it, but like on Better Podcasting, we do polls throughout the week, or we ask a question, or on Sterling Tribune, we engage with news stories.
What I recommend in general is a guy that's managed a lot of social media before, as for my job, focus on the networks you're already spending your time. If you don't spend a lot of time on Facebook naturally, don't make a Facebook page because you're not already going there. I didn't make a Twitter account for our podcast because I'm already on Twitter. I'm verified, by the way. How has no one mentioned that? Everyone on the network brings it up literally every time we talk.
I lost the poll. My poll was 2 minutes in, you would mention it.
I thought you would have. Anyway, I spend a bunch of time on Twitter, so I'm tweeting that stuff. And John does the same thing. We're both on Twitter. We spend less time in Google Plus now because we're not there. We don't update our Tumblr page because I don't spend time on Tumblr. So if you've got a lot of Facebook friends and you post regularly, then post on your personal page. Maybe invite people to follow you there. But don't. I would discourage you from making new locations, because if you're not already there, it's going to be a bit harder. I follow Better Podcasting. It's really well run and everything, but it's not as active as like Steven, the network owner and SP's co-host, who is posting a lot on his personal Twitter. So I'll mention him, or I'll mention SP by name if I'm trying to get their attention. So I say just kind of go where you already are, and that's generally will help you keep that content afloat, because otherwise it becomes another task, and that is difficult to maintain.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, and I got to break down all this stuff. But if you have any more questions, we'll be available out in the hallway. Thank you so much for spending some of your Gen Con.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.